Okay, so we went through a video previously of all the premises, which are the facts, scientific facts that the Polaris Institute program is based on. Now we're going to walk through a short version of the practices. So the last of the premises in the previous video was that practice is just that, practice. These are the ways that you practice getting better and being able to perform better in the game of life. So let's walk through what we actually practice, what the practices are. We will use these practices in, as we talked about earlier, formal practice, where we are specifically practicing the skill, but we'll also then hopefully be applying these practices in our everyday lives. Practices come in three different categories. And let me note, by the way, again, this 3-circle model is probably something we're going to change. We'll probably take the premises and practices out of the model, and we'll talk about that later when I do the performance section. But for now, we'll go through this as it's laid out on the screen. The first set of practices are the category of ownership. This is personally taking ownership of your experience, being able to take ownership of your experience, being able to start to know what's going on and have the ability to do something about it. And ownership practices fall into 6 different specific practices, I guess. The first one is be the observer. We all have life happen and things go past us and we respond to them. But typically those responses, if you haven't ever done any practice work like this, will carry you away. I mentioned before that that you can be angry or you can feel angry. You can be sad or you can feel sad. That sounds like just a subtle semantic difference in language, but it's actually a huge difference in ownership of your experience. Being angry means anger has picked you up and carried you away on a carnival ride, on a roller coaster, that you're just on a ride until it ends. And you don't have any control over it. You don't have the ability to decide whether to get off the roller coaster or whether to get on in the first place. Feeling angry is having the same experience, but being able to realize you are angry and witness the anger and focus on the anger and figure out what the anger feels like. So being the observer is the ability to see what is happening as it happens versus just being carried away by it. It's the ability to take one step back and observe what is happening in the universe, what is happening, more importantly, inside yourself. It's important to note that this does not mean distancing yourself from your experience. It's not that you don't experience sadness or happiness or joy or anger. In fact, you can make the case that you experience it more because you really do focus on it. What does this feel like? What am I experiencing? What is the good part of this? What is the bad part of this? It's the effect of stopping and actually paying attention to what is happening versus just being swept away by it. You might look at this as an example of taking a bite of an apple. You can take a bite of an apple and not even pay attention to the fact that you're eating an apple. You can be distracted somewhere else and you can be doing other things, or you can actually focus on that apple and what it tastes like and really examine every nuance of the tartness and the sweetness and the crunchiness. So the first step of ownership of being the observer is to actually decide, I'm going to take an interest in what's happening. I'm going to see it. I'm going to feel it. I'm going to experience it. I'm going to watch it as it plays out. That's the first step in owning your experience. And that's the biggest first step. The second step is when you are observing, you need to observe with curiosity. You need to be curious about what is happening, all the different aspects of it, all the nuances of it. Look at it as though it's something to be explored. And that relates to the next one, which is you want to observe with curiosity and not judgment. So you don't want to say this is good, this is bad. It just is. This is just the life that is happening to me right now. So the third one there is be gentle with yourself. We have a tendency as human beings to be critical because we want to get better. We want to improve. We want to not make mistakes again because, as we talked about before, our mind's primary goal is to keep us safe. And so everything we can do to make ourselves better, figure out what we did wrong last time, not do that again next time, will help keep us safe. But that ends up to be a critical, judgmental process where you're constantly tearing everything down and trying to figure out what's wrong. That is not the way if you want to train something to change or improve. And the perfect example of this in the be gentle with yourself model is think of training a puppy. When you train a puppy to go outside when it has to go to the bathroom, you don't start by ridiculing the puppy and beating the puppy when it does something wrong, because if it's just a puppy, it doesn't know what it's supposed to do. What you do instead is you look for every opportunity to praise the puppy when it even goes toward the door, when it even looks at the door. And you consistently praise and build the puppy's self-esteem and show the puppy what it should do by making it feel better and better, and you're gentle with the puppy. It's the same thing if you want to retrain your mind to do something different. It doesn't help for you to berate yourself, slam yourself, and tell yourself you're bad. That is not the way to train yourself to go outside, to go to the bathroom, or whatever it is you're trying to train yourself to be more loving, to be less angry, to be less reactive, to be more calm, to be able to sleep. All those things, you will naturally find yourself slamming yourself and being angry with yourself or being negative with yourself. But you have to remember that that is not the way to retrain yourself. So you want to train yourself like a puppy by being gentle with yourself, encouraging any positive movement toward where you want to go and not focusing on the negative. The fourth premise here, fourth practice actually under ownership is maintaining beginner's mind. So one of the things that our minds do is once we know something, we tend to disregard it and focus on what we don't know. So we tend to just sort of like, okay, got it. I know how to walk. I know how to use a fork. I know what the sunlight is. I know all these things. So you tend to never revisit them again, and you file them away as automatic stuff. I know what a steak tastes like. And so what happens is that sometimes, well, all the time, when you experience something for the first time, it is amazing. It is dramatic. The first time you ever have, the world's greatest steak, the first time you ever have sex, the first time you ever go to a Caribbean beach. Those experiences are amazing and dramatic, and wow, you can't believe how awesome it is. But what happens is our brains tend to get used to things and tend to be focused mostly on what could go wrong or what isn't happening versus what actually is happening. So it tends to file that away and say, okay, got that. I know what a steak is. I know what a beach is. And so over time, you will get less of the experience each time you do it. You can imagine, for example, the first time you ever touched the hand of the person you're most in love with in the world. That was an electric moment, but now it's meaningless. You don't even consider doing it again because it's so meaningless. But there was a time when that was the most powerful thing that had ever happened to you. If you can find a way, and this is maintaining beginner's mind, to try to experience things like you did the very first time you ever ate an apple, the first time you ever drove a car, the first time you ever ran. If you can experience those things the way you did the very first time, it's not possible to do it literally like the first time, but if you can focus on trying to find the aspects of that are still enjoyable, still amazing, because it's still just as amazing as it was the first time, your brain just isn't paying attention to it anymore because it doesn't matter because I've got that handled. So maintaining beginner's mind is a really important technique and practice to use to try to stay focused on what's important in life. And then you can use the other practices as well to then be gentle with yourself as you continue to try that, observe with curiosity, and so on. Number 5 in the ownership category is relish prediction error. We talked about in the premises, facts that your brain is creating reality for you. It's a projection of what your brain's guess is that is happening around you at all times. And so your brain is generating that from internal memory. Well, what happens is occasionally your brain guesses wrong, right? That is when something happens in the world where you bump into something or something doesn't go the way you planned or it doesn't feel the way you expected. What that is that's an error in your brain's prediction. Your brain predicted what reality is. It created a reality for you, and bam, you bump into something. Well, that is an evidence that your brain had an error in its prediction. What's really important in training yourself to take ownership of your response, of your experience, and be able to update it and be able to start making changes in your life and in yourself is owning that moment of error. Meaning understanding that it's something that is a natural thing that occurred, but it's a real thing that occurred. Because if you can relish that moment as a learning experience, you have 3 options when an error happens in your prediction, when an error happens in your life, when something goes the way you don't expect it to go, or you're not happy with the way it goes, or something breaks. You can use that information from the universe, from actual reality, to update your brain's projection of reality and say, oh, you know what? Sometimes that does happen. I need to make sure that I think that that's a possibility in the future. So that's a learning experience. That's called learning. You can update the programming in your brain to add that possibility that just happened that you didn't expect to the list of possibilities your brain will consider in the future when it creates that reality again. You can ignore that prediction error. You can simply blow right past it and not even see that it exists. And we all see this happen to other people. We can maybe even recognize it in ourselves sometimes. Somebody might say something to you, something might happen, and you don't even know it happened. You just completely ignore it. Yes, there was something that they didn't expect. I said something to someone, they said something back to me, but whatever, I'm going to blow on past that because that's not what I need to have happen right now. So you can ignore a prediction error when it comes up. And that's commonly what we do because we want things to be the way we predict them to be. And the third possibility with a prediction error is that you can force reality to fit your prediction.